The Finance Committee's meeting to order. Today is August 31st. Got to do some housekeeping, make an announcement here. So pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and Governor's March 15th order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather, this meeting of the Town of Adams Finance Committee is being conducted via remote participation with limited in-person attendance not to exceed the room capacity of 10 individuals. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure the fully access to proceedings as provided for in the order. And the Zoom call-in information has been posted on the town's website. That being said, I will now call the meeting to order with a roll call of attendance. Brian Johnson here. John Cowie here. Craig Morgan here. Charles Foster
here.
Rachel Tomquist
here.
Sarah Klein.
Present.
Amy Kupiec
Here.
Justin Duval
Here.
Stephanie Melito
Here.
Carol Cushionetti
Here.
Jay Mesawar.
Here.
Michelle Butler on the line.
Here.
Oh, good. Jason Nosher, is he in? No, okay. Anybody else on the line that I missed? Okay, so we do have a quorum. 13 of us, including myself, Deb. So we will begin with the approval of two sets of minutes that were provided to you. The first are the minutes of the May 28th meeting. May I have a motion to accept those minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Motion by John and a second by Brian. Any discussion?
In the minutes, Charles Foster originally had asked for clarification on the step increases, and there's a notation.
I have not seen anything in addition to what we received. And let me ask Kit if he's heard anything in addition. I don't.
No,
think
I
he
have
would
not.
Would you have? Okay, thank you. Any other questions on the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, take that. Okay, I'm sorry. I should do a roll call for the minutes. Okay, so we'll do the roll call again. Tim approved. Brian? Second. Brian approved. John?
Approved.
Craig? Approved. Kit?
Approve.
Rachel?
Approved.
Sarah?
Approved.
Amy?
Approved.
Justin probably has to abstain. Stephanie probably has to abstain. Carol?
Approved.
Jay?
Approved.
Michelle?
Approved.
They are approved. Next are the minutes from the June 4th meeting. May I get a motion to approve?
Motion to approve the minutes.
John, second by Brian. Is there any discussion from the June 4th minutes? Hearing none, I'll again call for a roll call. I approve. Brian?
Approved.
John Cowie?
Approved.
Craig? Approved. Kit?
I approve.
Rachel?
Approved.
Sarah?
Approved.
Amy?
Approved.
Take abstentions from Justin and Stephanie. Carol?
Abstain. I wasn't there.
Carol abstains. Jay
Approved.
and Michelle.
Approved.
Okay. The minutes are approved. Now we'll get into the meat of this evening's or afternoon's agenda, the budget reduction, review, and approval. Before we go in,
until we receive the fiscal 21 year sheet numbers, or was finally a solid figure to be able to budget from. What does that mean in dollars and cents? For the town, we received $2,764,319 and stayed to $438. There was approximately $70,000. So that was our initial target of $70,000 to reduce from the budget. And if you recall, very early on, when the economic ramifications of the COVID crisis began, we were somewhat concerned exactly what that state reduction number would look like. We thought it could be a lot more than just $70,000. So we dodged a bullet there. The target number of reductions was exceeded by approximately 18 total reductions from the fiscal 21 budget. Those affected sections are the ones that are before you this evening. The overview we used, Mary and I used a variety of different tools to achieve this number, and we can go through overall what some of these are. The first one is an attrition realization. So as you folks know, we had 5 significant retirements from the police department. Some of those retirements were not able to be realized prior to the change of the fiscal year. We were able to make those changes because we're now putting a budget together in September. So we were able to see some of those savings from police department retirement. We were also able to achieve some reduction due to people changing, coming off town insurance. Single insurance plan is $8,000, family insurance plan is about $16,000. So we were able to achieve some savings there. That was one technique utilized. Another technique that was utilized was we were able to take advantage of a very difficult decision we had to make, which was furloughing staff. So as you recall, sometime in March or early April, we had to furlough some staff. We furloughed libraries, we furloughed council on aging staff, and we furloughed the administrative support staff here in this building. That achieved 2 things. Number one, it achieved savings on the end of the fiscal year 20 budget. If you recall, we were somewhat concerned as to what our receipts would look like in that last quarter of fiscal 20. So we made the difficult decision to furlough staff, so we achieved some savings on that end. The oddball factor is the fact that we were able to achieve savings up front in fiscal 21. That left Mary and I with 2 choices that we had to make. If we budget for fiscal 21 as if that staff was working full time, we would have to include that on the budget and raise that on the tax rate. Yet we knew we weren't going to spend that money because July, August, and portions of September, some of that staff is still furloughed. So what we did is we reduced hours. So we're actually only paying for the anticipated at this point. So we were able to do that. Most of that is your library staff and some council on aging staff. And there's a few folks in this building as well. The other technique we were able to utilize is we looked at all of the stipends that were paid out to the boards, committees, and commissions. The grand total for that is about $15,998 that the town spends annually on the stipends for the various boards. We reduced down all of the boards to a $300 flat stipend for this year, as well as a $350 stipend for chairman. That is saving approximately $13,000, and that's one of the departments agenda tonight, why we have to adjust those this evening. So that was one technique. And the other two techniques that are left is our electricity line item, which is under public buildings and property maintenance. We annually budget $140,000 on that line item. If you look at our history, we spent maybe about $124,000, $125,000 in electricity. We were very lucky that we have a solar installation farm up on East Street. We've been able to achieve some savings because we used the credits that we earned from that solar field, and we apply that to some of our largest electricity accounts in town, which is mostly the wastewater treatment plant. So if we looked at the history of the electricity use of the town and how we've been doing so far, we thought reducing that line item by $10,000 was a safe savings. So you'll see that drop from 140 down to 130. The last technique is we looked at the Council on Aging. In the time that I've been town administrator, I believe we've hired at least 6 part-time van drivers at the Council on Aging. We took this opportunity to look at the organization of the Council on Aging, and a decision has been made that we are going to eliminate the 4 part-time drivers, hire 1 full-time 35-hour-a-week driver with benefits, operate 1 van primarily, keeping the second van. We also expanded the line item for per diem drivers from $3,000 to $6,000. So at peak times, we'll be able to augment the service using a per diem van driver that has no benefits attached to it and is not carried on a regular basis. We were able to achieve, you'll see, I want to say it's about $18,000 or $19,000 by making that change.
Quick question, is this permanent?
For Council on Aging?
Yeah.
If it works out well, yes. If it doesn't work out, if we're finding that there's service disruptions and the community's not served, we'll scrap it and go back to something else. I would, John, look at everything that I'm saying to you tonight as tools and ways for us to put through a fiscal 21 budget without service reductions and without permanent furloughs or layoffs of staff. And we were able to achieve that goal. And thankfully, we're able to achieve that by not making too much of a dent in anything that we do. I told Erica, I said, if it doesn't work, we'll go back to it. But part of the issue is stability in that department in terms of van drivers. So it's very difficult to recruit part-time employees with no benefits and no other amenities.
Quick question, I think I know the answer, but part-time employees who are laid off, they're government employees, so did they get the extra, were they eligible for the extra $600?
I believe the answer is yes. They were. And we did a cost-benefit analysis as to whether or not we would achieve savings by keeping them working, even though they were at home, not physically in the building, or if we were going to achieve savings by furloughing them, even though there would be a slight uptick in the unemployment side. And that was the answer, and that's why we did what we did. We still achieved savings by doing that. So those were the techniques that we used. Thankfully, we didn't have to make any other reductions in service or any other personnel cuts. That doesn't mean more won't come down the road, depending upon how the receipts are, but knock on wood, we're fairly stable. Our receipts are good so far. This community pays their taxes for the most part on time, so we've been good with our receipts and our cash flow. I think the point I want to make is we could have been having a far more difficult conversation had things not worked out this way. So with that, that is the overall techniques and tools that were used, and we can go into the individual sections where it actually shows the distinction.
Okay. If anybody has any questions on the overview, we can move right into,
I guess, maybe we have
yeah,
one on that.
sure.
How does, when we went on to 112, how does that flow into the 2021 budget? How do we make them so we don't have problems in October when they go to the state?
So early on, there was conversation at the state level that the spending for July, August, and September, or any one month that was chosen to be 112, would be deficit spending attached to fiscal 20. Then the Department of Revenue reversed that and said it'll be worked into fiscal 21. So those numbers that we used for July, August, and September will be blended into they will become part of the fiscal 21 budget. So in reality, your fiscal 21 budget will eventually have been for a normal fiscal year. And that is why there was deficit spending control on the 112, where we could only spend a basement number of that 1.3 million. We never came close to that in any month except for the one that we have authorized for September, simply because the quarterly payment for the school district is due. Craig?
Yeah, the figures kept changing, what we got out of the state, but at one point, the governor said that when he first was gonna go to his 1/12 state budget, that he was going to review that budget in December, I believe, and look at revenues and decide what he was gonna do there. Is it possible that we go through this budget, accept it, and we get caught a second time?
The governor always has the option to do 9C cuts. I think if you talk to Rep. Barrett and you talk to Senator Hines, they feel very comfortable to use the fiscal 20 cherry sheet numbers. There was the 90-day temporary budget that says when the state puts the balance of the fiscal year budget together, those numbers will not be cut. But I would, as Mary has said on many occasions, and as I'm now saying, everything is estimated. But we feel this is the best route forward. Worst case scenario, we have to look at additional cuts at a special town meeting and we reduce further. But I think this is pretty conservative, going forward. We'll watch the receipts. That's the real key. But if you look at the receipt numbers, as we talked about in March, we're already conservative in how we estimate those.
Okay, so we will move into our particular budget that we're looking at, and starting in the personnel services area. The first is the selectmen's budget, and in the new pages that you have, those will be reflected as pages 1 and 2.
So that section shows, what I'll do, Tim, is you announce it, and I'll tell everybody what the individual reductions. So this section just reflects that reduction in stipends. The requested appropriation from the original budget was $7,137,000. It's now been reduced to $1,834, and that shows the reduction in stipends for the selectmen. And in comparison, so everybody knows, I know there was some conversation about stipends when we went through this back in early spring. The chairman of the select board was budgeted for $2,000. The balance of the board membership was $1,200, and that's been reduced, you'll hear me say, for the balance of the other boards and committees, down to $350 for the chairman, $300 for the selectmen. And as John asked earlier about if any of these changes are permanent, I would just remain that these are tools and techniques that we're using for this fiscal year. It doesn't mean they will remain the same for the next fiscal year. That's a big question mark all around for what fiscal 22 is going to look like.
We open it up for discussions. I would ask for a motion for the selectmen.
A motion.
Motion by Brian, second by Craig. So we are looking at a revised personnel budget of $1,834.
Are we doing, we have taken Roman numeral 1, 2, or we,
No,
The first part of your packet is that first part of your budget book, Roman numerals 1 through, 20.
20 or something there.
And then behind that, page 88, which is the last item on your agenda, so you can pull that aside. And then it's pages 1 and 2 right behind page 88. It's a little out of order, I don't know.
Are we gonna go back to that? I just have,
So back to what?
back to Roman numeral 2.
That was the overview that, they read that.
Yeah, it's just, this is just a mathematical thing. I wanna see something wrong. When we, the operating expenses, okay, I took the, 2020 was 2,229,143. 2021 was going to be 2,328,180. And I subtracted that, and I come up with 91,000. and I do the numerator and denominator thing, we're saying there's 3.79. I come up with 4.4. It's nothing major, but I'm just wondering if there's something about this.
It's a Mary question, John. There's,
Okay, and I want to know whether or not, if we were actually doing a 3.79, is it going to be reflected in the numbers that I'm looking at?
I can tell you that the amount of time that's been spent on this budget, particularly by Mary and myself, that I feel very confident that's 3.79%. No, she won't mind answering the question. It's always good to ask questions, but that's the figure.
Okay, because, all right, I'll get it out of
The only other thing, and I don't know if the only other changes that were made to the budget, which everyone's aware of, if you recall, when we were talking about the overlay, we've been looking she'll answer for you.
Okay. I'll give it a try.
Are you all
What
set?
page are we on now? Page 1?
Page 1, absolutely.
Okay. I'm with you.
We are $1,834. Any other further discussion on the personnel budget for the selectmen? Okay, I will then call for a roll call vote on that budget. Tim, yes. Brian?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Craig?
Yes.
Kit?
Yes.
Rachel?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Justin?
I would like to abstain.
Thank you. Stephanie?
Yes.
Carol?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Yes.
Michelle? Okay, it passes. Thank you. We'll next move on to the assessors. That's labeled number 27, 28. Your budget.
Thank you, Tim. So most of these, you'll see folks as we go through, particularly for our new members, and welcome to our new members on the Finance Committee. You'll see that most of the pages are the overall personnel services expenses of the budget, followed by the detail sheet. There's usually the second sheet that you see referenced. So once again, for the assessor pages 27 and 28, 27 is the personnel services budget request. Previously, the request was 137,510. That's been reduced to 134,466. Page 28 shows you that detail. The previous reduction was 137,510, showing that reduction to 134. The individual line items are for the Board of Assessors. Their stipends were $1,800 apiece, with the reduction down to $300.
Good question.
Can I just, before we ask a question, can I just have a motion to put it on the table, please?
Motion.
Motion by Craig and a second by Brian. No, go ahead, John.
The stipend, the reduction, since they're elected, you have the authority to.
Yes.
Yeah.
We did a charter check, we checked with town council, there's no requirement.
I think town meeting sets the, at every meeting, the stipends for town. So. Any other questions, John, or anybody?
I have some questions. It's Kit.
Sure, Kit, go ahead.
All right. Well, just for beginners, every place that says personal services, could we correct it for next year to say personnel with 2 N's and end in EL?
Yes.
And there's no unemployment actual expended for 2019 or 2020. How come? This is just throughout all the departments.
I guess I didn't follow your question. What was it?
In 2020,
Yep.
unemployment insurance actually expended, 0.
Oh, unemployment insurance.
Yeah, it's like that with all the departments.
Very question.
We can follow up with Mary and maybe have that answer for you on
Okay,
Thursday.
and, have the step increases been corrected?
The unemployment insurance is probably, it probably lives in its own line item elsewhere in the budget. That's probably the answer. to
All right, if
unemployment
it
insurance.
is, let me know Thursday. But back to the step increases, have they been corrected?
I don't remember the context of that topic. I don't.
I think it was on the timing, right? Is that what you're
Yeah.
referring to, Kit? The
You're eligible
timing of-
for a step
of-
increases on the first day of the first quarter after their anniversary date. So if your anniversary date's December 31st, you're eligible January 1st. If your anniversary date's January 2nd, you're not eligible until March 30th, until April 1st.
So the answer to your question, Mr. Foster, on that, now I recall, is the language you're citing is the language if merit award increases were to, those are, step increases are not merit awards, they are time and grade awards, time with the town. I believe that was the answer when I asked Mary, and she should have, I believe we had put an email out and communicated that. That's the merit increase language from the person. We don't practice those. But we'll confirm that for you.
Did you have any other questions, Kit?
No.
Okay.
I have a question. On the
Sure.
unemployment insurance, due to this COVID-19 and everything, and see the unemployment insurance being increased over the next year or so?
No, if it does, Mary thought it would go up de minimis amount. That's why we had done the cost benefit now, thinking that it might be less expensive for us to keep everybody working.
No.
And it's not. Our unemployment insurance was minimal to begin with, so Mary didn't think it was gonna go up that much.
Oh,
And most of our folks are, we still have a handful furloughed, but majority have been brought back periodically. I'm trying to find the section where I think the unemployment insurance is in. It wasn't the question I was anticipating.
Any other questions from the board, or the committee, I should say?
What about medical insurance? You seen an increase there?
Medical insurance with the Berkshire Health Group. We've been pretty flat, I believe, whatever we had talked about back in March, we've been pretty flat last 3 years.
Okay.
Knock on wood, for fiscal 22 is gonna be a whole different ballgame.
Okay, if there are no further questions, I will then call for a roll call vote on the assessor's personnel budget. Tim, yes. Brian?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Craig?
Yes.
Yes.
Rachel?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes. Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Justin? Stephanie?
Yes.
Carol?
No, they didn't say much.
Jay?
Yes.
Yeah, change it for next year.
Michelle?
Yes.
Thank you. That passes. Next, we move to the following pages, which are 39 and 40, the registrar of voters. So again, I'll turn it over to Jay.
Thank you, Tim. So page 39, you'll see the overall personnel services for registrations as register of voters. We had budgeted $2,004. We're asking for a reduction down to $1,268. The detail can be found on page 40. You'll see that reduction from 2004 down to 1,268 there. And that's reflective of the reduction in the stipend, $625 previously for the chair, $525 previously for the members the exception of, the person who serves as clerk, all line item back down to 350 to 300, even consistent, as you can see with the other boards.
I'll ask for a motion for the registrars.
Motion on the register.
Motion from John,
Second.
second by Brian. Any other comments from the committee? Hearing no questions, I'll again do a roll call vote. Tim, yes. Brian?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Craig?
Yes.
Kit?
Yes.
Rachel?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Justin?
Yes.
Stephanie?
Yes.
Carol?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
And Michelle?
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, and I'll just make a note, somebody asked Mary again, I think I asked her just in the chat, but she always asks the clock, I think, on the, like if you're on page 40, you see the Medicare is 5444, you got 17. She's got 18. But she doesn't every time.
But maybe it's a rounding, it could be a rounding factor in one of the numbers. I don't.
That's just all that.
Okay. Okay, we'll move next to inspection services, which are pages 50 and 51. And again, Jay?
Sure, same thing here, folks, page 50, personnel services for inspection services, page 51, the detail. This is showing a reduction from 637,000 down to 207,306. That is reflected in the detail on page 51, where the reduction from the stipend the Board of Health previously received, Chairman 1,386, 924 for members. That's been reduced again to 350 and 300. We also reduced the sanitary inspector line item. We usually use that line item to pay for any perk test. That's your Title V, your septic test. We're already into the fiscal year, so we gambled that we wouldn't need 1,500. We reduced it down to 5. I can also tell you that we're attempting to send Mr. Blaisdell to school to become Title V certified, so we can now charge other communities for his services. But again, this just gives you an example of where we were looking for reductions on this budget without affecting service delivery to it. Those were the only changes for that chapter.
Okay. So a reduction of $3,331. I'll ask for a motion.
Motion.
Motion John, second by Brian. Any discussions or questions for the committee? Hearing none, we'll again do a roll call vote. Tim, yes. Brian? John?
Yes.
Craig?
Yes.
Yes.
Kit? Rachel?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Justin? Stephanie?
Yes.
Carol?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Michelle? Thank you. We move page 55 and 56, the police department budget. Again, I'll start with Jay.
So police, I just want to give you a little bit of an overview on how these numbers came up and what some of our options were. Previously, we had approved $1,775,161 for personnel services for the police department. We're asking for a reduction down to $1,727,366. We were able to achieve that again by balancing out some of the retirements that have been effectuated since July 1st, and with the new salaries put in, a couple of insurance changes. The other point I want to make is we are now almost budgeted for essentially So we were able to make these reductions, achieve cost savings, and maintain the staffing of our police department. What will that achieve? If we have proper staffing, we believe we'll be able to show eventual reduction in the amount of overtime that is, one, spent, and two, budgeted for the police overtime. There's always going to be overtime associated for vacation, sick time, et cetera. But our goal is to be able to maintain a headcount so we can fund the majority of our shifts on straight time and reduce overtime.
How many retirements were there?
We had five retirements.
Include the chief, right?
It did, yeah. So we were able to achieve some savings there. So that's essentially how that number came about, that reduction, from the 1,775,000 down to the 1,777,000. That is not actually any personnel layoffs or furloughs or decision not to hire. We were able to achieve that through attrition, through some insurance changes. We hired some newer officers that came in at a lower rate. So we kind of lucked out there because frankly, that was one of the other options is.
Yeah, how many newer officers did you hire?
We hired 2 new ones in the last month, and we have 1 more vacancy. And I have to tell you that not hiring that third vacant position was incredibly tempting because it's anywhere from $40,000 to $60,000 depending on the insurance plan. But we felt if we could achieve the savings elsewhere, we need a fully staffed department. Some of our officers are at 16 hours a day working, and the overtime is quite expensive. So we're not ever going to be able to know what the natural organic overtime cost is of the department as we're structured with the current schedule in place without bringing us up to full staff. That was the first order I gave the chief was tell me the number that you need for it. So we maintain 4 sergeants, 12 patrolmen, 1 detective, and the chief with this budget.
John?
Okay, let me get clarification on this. The one detective, is that the lieutenant?
No,
Okay, because
the lieutenant's been removed from the budget in its entirety.
okay. And, I have 19 employees. Is that full staff or is that not full staff?
You're including Melissa Shafrick, who is the admin assistant. So on your new page 56,
Right. So she's you're not including her.
well, I don't include her in my assessment in terms of uniformed officers.
Right.
If you want to look at it from the department perspective, everyone who's paid out of the police, it's the chief, the admin assistant, 4 sergeants, and then you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 patrolmen. One of those patrolmen is detective.
And so how many more would, there were full staff, how many more would that?
We think we're at full staff with this number. We have 1 open position budgeted.
What about the dog?
He's in here, patrolman.
Okay, so we've heard an overview. We got a reduction in police budget. I think it's somewhere around $48,000. So I would ask for a motion.
Motion on the police budget.
Motion by John, second by Brian. Any other questions or
I have
discussion from
one.
the committee?
They
Yeah,
were
go ahead,
over
Kevin.
budget. How do we make up the difference? Where did they get the money from?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear you.
The police department was over budget by, $19,000 or so. Now, where did that extra money come from?
The overtime,
No, that's ridiculous, the overtime. That's gotta be reeled in. But where's the extra money to pay for them being over budget come from?
Okay, yeah, we budgeted last year, he's saying it's 1,751,000 and we spent 1,769,000, so we were over 19,000.
There's a provision in the law that allows municipalities at the end of the fiscal year to make some changes with money to that. She can give you the exact detail as to exactly what she did in order to do that. But again, I want to make incredibly clear, that's why we have a new police chief. That's why we're structured the way we are. We did not replace the lieutenant. We're going to go back to a 4-sergeant model. And we're hiring patrolmen at a far lesser rate than we were paying before, because some of the officers have been around, some of our retirees have been around quite a long time. And that's how we were able to achieve those savings. And with 13 patrolmen working, 12 patrolmen working with the 4 sergeants, we're gonna see how we perform in terms of personnel costs. And that should show some savings on the overtime side.
And did you say there's one position in here budgeted that's not filled yet?
Yes, we have 3 vacant patrolman positions. We made offers to 3 people, 2 accepted, 1 declined. We're now in the process of hiring, going back out and recruiting for the 3rd.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee?
Do you see any retirements coming up within the next 3 or 5 years for patrolmen?
No, not in the police.
We have a motion and a second already. I do want to make one note here that Finance Committee member, actually new Finance Committee member, Julie Sneezek just joined the meeting. So we could let that reflect in the minutes, Deb. Thanks. Okay, so if there are no further,
Here you go, John.
okay,
Mary's on the call.
we'll vote on this and then we can maybe ask her any questions after. Okay, so as far as the police budget, Brian,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Craig,
Yes.
Kit,
Yes.
Rachel,
Yes.
Sarah,
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
Justin,
Yes.
Stephanie,
Yes. Yes.
Carol,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Michelle,
I
Julie?
abstain because I didn't really hear anything on it.
Understandable.
Okay.
Thank you. And it passes. Next on our list, Council on Aging. Hey, I'm sorry, pages 71 and 72. Yep.
I just looked at. Okay, so Council on Aging, we did, here is where you're gonna see that change in the structure. So if you look at page 72, your new page 72, you will see that we have the director of the senior center still, outreach coordinator, admin assistant. And you'll see that we've now included van driver, Council on Aging, bringing that person in at a grade 5, step 1, which is the entry level, and budgeted anticipated for a family insurance plan. That is a new structure. The previous structure had 4 part-time van driver positions for Council on Aging. So we're going to attempt that structure. You'll also see that previously we had only budgeted $3,000 for per diem van drivers. We doubled that to $6,000 to allow Erica some flexibility within Council on Aging to operate 2 vans when needed for surge. So those are the changes within Council on Aging. That reflects a reduction from $225,835 down to $217,719.
Thank you. So, can I ask for a motion for the Council on Aging? Brian, any discussions from the committee?
I just got a question.
Yes, Craig, go ahead.
We're replacing what, 1, 2, 3, 4 part-time drivers with 1 full-time driver? Okay, what were the total hours that the 4 part-time drivers were putting in?
They were paid for 19,
Paid for 19.
and they ran 2 vans overlapped occasionally.
Buster.
Are we, by adding this 1 person, going to able to duplicate the service that we had with 4 part-time drivers and 2
Yes.
vans?
Yes, And it may, and I'll say, it may not work, but we believe it will. And it will because the model has to change. The previous model was an on-demand level of service. You would call up and say, I have an appointment in North Adams on this particular day, this particular time. That van would operate on your schedule. If somebody else called in at the same time and the other second van wasn't, that other person would receive no service. There's a tool that the BRTA has called a route optimizer. And use the option of purchase or BRTA for health service. And Erica's it will optimize the routes. So where we'll receive the programming, the most frequently used locations within where our vans go, and it'll optimize the route. So in other words, the van may go to North Adams on Tuesday mornings, but may not go Wednesday. It may go elsewhere on Wednesday. So instead of having the van go, which is an inefficient model based on the demand, it'll be a culture change, but we're going to attempt the other way around, and that's how we're going to attempt to achieve the savings, is one full-time van driver dedicated to that job and use the route optimizer to decide where that van is going and ask clients to make their way around it. That's why the other option was also to get rid of the second van. We did not believe, one, we would achieve any really good substantive cost savings by doing that, and number two, we then tie our hands if it doesn't work. So we keep the second van, we have the per diem van drivers, and that gives Erica that flexibility effectively and efficiently to use the second van we need. And again, we can scrap this model. You know, we may, if we decide that we need 2 full-time van drivers to really make this work and we can't afford it, then we'll have to go back to the part-time model. But in my management experience, since I've been here now a year and a half, that has been retained is van drivers. We have hired more van drivers, and don't forget, there's a substantial cost every time you hire a van driver because they are federal DOT regulated, so they need physicals, they need their periodic physicals, and there's that as well. So when we're exercising different techniques and we realized how much we were able to save just on salary line item alone, there's also the savings that will be achieved as well if we're not going through these folks. Again, it may not work, but now is the time to test it because you can see the substantial savings that we get.
Just a quick question. I understand that fans are going, we said we're going to field. Anyone who wants to go, and with Adams, the doctor, it's going to be up to them. I'm like trying to schedule their appointments on those days when they know they're going to go.
Yes.
Okay. So I don't believe we have a motion yet. Second? John and Brian. Okay. We're looking at a reduction of about $8,116. Any other questions or comments from the committee?
I guess, hi, it's Sarah. I'm a little curious about how it will work with potential COVID regulations and how many people will be allowed on the van at a time, et cetera. But I guess that can all be worked out.
That's an Erica question.
Look forward to the board of selectmen, and she's only carrying one, but it could be 2 or something. I'm not near my microphone.
I'm not sure what the regulations are. I believe at one point she said she was only taking one person at a time. Whether or not that's required by a COVID regulation or vehicle regulation, I don't know.
Does that answer it for you, Sarah? I guess whatever the governor or state guidelines are, they will be followed.
So if it's one person at a time, then the route optimizer isn't really going to matter per se.
It doesn't matter now.
It would be the same whether it was route optimizer or not. So.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing none, then I'll call for a vote. Brian? Yes. Rachel?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Yes.
Justin,
Yes.
Stephanie, Carol,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Michelle,
Yes.
Julie.
Abstain.
Thank you. It passes. Next, we go on to library, which is spelled out pages 10 and 78.
So in addressing the library, we were able to achieve some savings here, again, by allocating hours. Because the library had to close and has been closed for a period of time and has been open for curbside service, we had 2 full-time positions working part-time, and the majority of library savings there, they continue to be furloughed. So we have about 90 days worth of cost, labor, wage savings that's been programmed in here. So that's showing a reduction from 211 down to 203 for library. We had as an option to eliminate the library page position. If you folks remember the conversation that was had prior to my arrival and then in last year's budget, adding that library page position where Director Jaco was using some of her book money in order to help fund the position. Mary and I had made a promise that we would take that up by 50%, so we've kept it in there to honor our promise to Director Jaco to maintain her staffing. And because we were able to achieve savings, because the staff is presently furloughed, we didn't eliminate the position. So we've kept the library staffing intact for this fiscal year, which is obviously, I think, a goal that we would all like to have. The other issue with the library is any reductions that you make in it do affect our state aid that goes to the library. That is also something we wanted to protect. So we were able to avoid making any significant changes to the library that would jeopardize that state aid funding.
Let me get a motion and then we can go to questions, okay?
Make a motion.
Motion by Brian, second by Craig, and John has a question.
Yeah, Jay, did they just cut the hours of the children's library and there's another one near the adult library? Looks like they cut maybe a few hours out of it.
Everyone was cut.
I
Based
think they
on,
worked 35 hours, I think.
is Mary still on? You wanna ask that question, Mary?
I can't hear him.
Can't hear me?
No, you're not speaking loud enough.
Okay. Mary, how many hours did they cut on the 2 full-time employees at the library? I think they were working 35 hours.
Yes.
They've been working 16 to 19 hours a week. We cut about 180 hours out of each one of their pays, didn't we, Jay?
Yes. They're not back full-time yet, John. They're still working part-time. Yes, we programmed in October for state for them to, those positions come back full-time. What our plan is with the library, Director Jacob's been working full-time all along. The admin assistant and the children's librarian are normally the other 2 full-time folks. They've been working part-time. We're gonna anticipate bringing them back full-time in October and have the remainder of the staff in furlough status until we figure out what is the library gonna look like going forward. Is it gonna open in its normal course? Is it still gonna be reduced, et cetera? We're gonna tailor that as we go. So you have a reduction from July 1st until now, showing those hours. Mary budgeted showing October 1st, bring back those 2 positions.
But they are still getting their medical coverage.
Yes. Well, one, our adult services librarian was hired just before the library closed with the promise of being full-time with benefits. We brought her on part-time with no benefits, with the understanding that as soon as we could, she would go to full-time status with benefits. So she would get those benefits October.
So those benefits are not being paid to her right now.
Not right now. No. But you can see that they are appropriately budgeted for the balance of it. Yep.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Craig? you have-
Yeah.
Are we looking at anything, once this library opens again, as far as disinfecting or deep cleaning, whatever way you wanna call it. Because you got people coming in, you got the computers, multiple use, people on the computers. Some of the schools are looking at, running a 4-day week and closing 1 day a week to deep clean. Are we looking at anything like that?
Yes, the Director Jaco has a plan. She's following all the guidelines from the Massachusetts Library Association. She works with our health inspector to determine what the sanitation plan is, and the DPW director in terms of the custodial staff. And that's one of the reasons why it's not open right now full-time. One, because staffing furloughs, we've decided to continue the furlough, and frankly, that reason, if we open the building back up, you not only contaminate surfaces within the building, you now have more in circulation. And like when you return a book right now, that book goes out of circulation, I believe, for an additional week. She has all that, she's on top of all of that. But there's also a cost on the cleaning side.
And the follow-up question is, do we have money in case we have to hire more manpower for janitorial services?
CARES Act will allow that. So what we have to show is an estimated cost burden for hiring extra janitorial staff, which DPW director has done, and we're paying for that through the CARES Act reimbursement. But that's one of the reasons why, Craig, the buildings aren't just readily back open, and every community has that conversation because we have 2 custodians for multiple buildings.
Yeah, I
Any
have
further
one.
questions?
Kind of a general question.
Go ahead, Kip.
Is this a 9-month budget we're looking at or a 12-month budget?
12.
12. Now, does it include July, August, and September's expenditures
Yes.
or
So
budget?
Mary, do you want to, and that goes back to Mr. Cowie's question earlier. Mary, do you want to give your perspective from your conversations with the Department of Revenue, how the 1/12 expenditures from July, August, and September will be rolled in?
We've been running a deficit spending budget for July and August and September. As soon as we have town meeting, they don't even exist anymore. This is a 12-month budget. We've had to run within the constraints of the 1/12 budget we filed with the Department of Revenue. So this is a 12-month budget. It includes everything. The school will do the same thing. They're running on a 1/12 budget. They can only spend so much until we have a town meeting for them. And then everybody has to stay within the past budget of the people. And we're watching it close.
But, all right, those 3 months, are they included?
Yes, they are. Yes.
They're included in the 203,000.
Yes, they are.
Kit, if I could answer that, probably, I think I'm thinking along the same lines you are with this. Let's assume you had $120,000 approved at town meeting, but last year it was less than that. Maybe it was only $100,000. So for the first 3 months, you're only basing it on 1/12 of 100,000. The difference will be made up if your budget went up to 120,000 over the next 9 months. Conversely, it would go down if you overpaid during the first 3 months.
Yes, Tim, you have it precisely. Let me say that another way. When we had to furlough the staff in April, May, and June, the money that was appropriated is going to go in free cash. We're doing that conversely in that we're not appropriating the money we know we didn't spend in July and August.
Yeah, that money also go into free cash?
No, we're not going to appropriate it. That's how we realize the savings so that we can meet the state budget cuts.
And I still never received an answer of how much went into free cash that was extra from last year's budget.
We don't
And
have
it's
that
cool.
figure yet.
Well, we got actual numbers. I mean, with a quick adding and subtracting, but this budget I'm looking at, I got $138,000 extra. And that's with 2 departments being over budget by 34,000. I mean, you reconcile cash every month, don't you?
Oh, yeah. Reconciling cash and having unspent budget amounts are two different things. And when we have a full balance sheet compiled and file it with the Department of Revenue, we will have free cash numbers.
Okay. What you don't know what we have for free cash now?
Right now,
As of
we have
July
962,000 and change. It's in the budget book.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, well, that's it as of 2019.
That's being held and carried over.
All right. I just think there's a lot of money out there that's not being accounted for us.
We will account for every dime.
Well, it's extra. I mean, the schools are in the same boat.
We don't want to use extra money from 2020 on the 21 budget. We want to use extra money from 2019 on the 21 budget. Extra money from 2020 will be spent on the 22 budget.
Why?
That's the way it works.
Every
That's
other year?
That's the
It has
rule.
to be
The law.
certified by the state.
Yeah.
It is the law, so.
Yeah, I know, but I just want to know the amount. Because I think there's quite a bit extra from last year. And in this budget, you got the employees budgeted at working the hours they regularly work. And they're either furloughed or they're not working full time. That's going to be more extra money at the end of this year's budget.
Mr. Green, did you explain we've taken all the furloughs out that we felt comfortable with? I wasn't here for the whole meeting.
You
Jay?
took the furloughs out of the budget, but what about the ones you have budgeted working 38, 40 hours a week that are working 15, 16 hours a week? How many are those? How many employees are working part-time?
Jay, I'll leave that to you.
Okay,
That one person remains part-time until the job description is reviewed and we determine the most effective use of that person when they come back full-time. The library has 4 individuals still furloughed in their entirety. 2 individuals in the library are working part-time until October 1st when they will come back full-time status. The Council on Aging van drivers, 1 position, the 10-hour position is vacant and not filled. 3 other van drivers, 2 other van drivers were furloughed. 1 was brought back to part-time status only as needed on the vans.
yeah. That's the per diem driver?
I'm sorry?
That's the per diem driver?
No, that's
No?
under the previous structure. We had 4 part-time van drivers.
Yeah.
3 at 19 hours a week, 1 at 10. The 10-hour position had been vacant for some time and not filled because we went into COVID-19, so we didn't fill it. The other 2 positions remain for and 1 van driver was left. That's only staff working at Council on Aging, among the outreach coordinator and the director.
Yeah.
Did it answer for you, Kip?
Yeah, the library is just curb service right now.
The library is curb service for the library services. However, the building is partially open for computer access in order to get the census numbers through. So I believe she has the building, just the computer lab open for public access. And she's doing that with herself full-time and the 2 full-time people working part-time right now. So she has There's a total of 3 people working at the library.
Okay. That's all I have.
Okay. Any other questions from committee members? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. Brian?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Craig?
Yes.
Charles? Kim?
Yes. Yeah.
Rachel?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Justin?
Yes.
Stephanie?
Yes.
Carol?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
Julie?
Abstain.
That's approved. We go to the Department of Public Works. Personnel. And I'll turn it over to Jay again.
So on page 97, you'll see the detail for Public Works. This only affects the cemetery commissioners, of which there's 3. The previous budgeted amount for the cemetery commissioners were $600 for the chairman and $500 for the 2 respective members. That's been reduced to $350 for the chairman, $300 for the 2 members, and that shows the modest reduction from $1,397,300 to $1,396,500. And why did we do that if the number was so de minimis? Mary and I did that because we felt it was important, and in meeting with the budget subcommittee of the selectmen, we felt it was important to treat each individual commission and board. That's the only change within the Department of Public Works.
Thank you. I'll ask for a motion on the DPW personnel budget.
Make a motion.
Brian makes a motion. Second by,
Second.
That include,
second, I'm sorry, who made a second?
Michelle.
Michelle, thank you. Hi, John. Did you have a question, John?
yeah. Are we doing also on 98? This is 96.
It covers,
96 is your personnel services. 97 is the detail sheet. And 98 is only wastewater with no changes to wastewater.
Thought there was one, and I don't know, thought I had it underlined, maybe I did.
Oh, you actually, you know what, John, you might be
Yeah.
referring to the seasonal workers. Thank you. Seasonal workers, we had originally budgeted for a total number of 11. We've only utilized 5. So we've achieved some savings there as well.
And I had another question about the medical. Somebody went from family plan, I think, to 0. And then it looked like there were a couple of others in the high.
Yes, that's possible. There may have been. I know, Mary, do you recall any changes within DPW for a medical plan?
Yes, there was a recently married employee, and we added it in because I got to pay for his married health insurance now.
I think there was somebody that went off, and my question would be,
Washed out.
but it washed out.
Yeah.
Because the 2
Yes.
on the highway went from 6 to 6, and the 1 who. Do we, since there was an employee, or a person volunteered this, I hope you guys were discussing this within the department, and somebody stepped up and said, I'm coming off, or do you guys, to the employee, is there any question there that's sensitive thing? If you have private insurance and you're eligible under private insurance, that you take the private insurance first rather than our insurance. Now, the person who decides to just
On their own volition to
just
do
get
it.
it on their own volition.
Mhm. That's why when you budget for a position that's not filled, we have no choice but to budget on the insurance side as if they were to take a family plan. Because if you put a, say, I'm gonna gamble that I'm gonna hire somebody who's not gonna take a family plan, that's an $8,000 cost. You go through hiring, you go through the onboarding process. By the way, I'm married with 3 kids. I want a family plan. You just now shorted yourself $8,000. So when we put these together, like for example with the police budget, and because we're hiring a lateral, we have to assume a certain median average amount that we have to budget for. So again, it can't be precise science. You have to use the best information you have and protect yourself to give yourself the maximum exposure that you would have in the higher school.
But there is no law in this that requires a very specific product to not apply for the.
Not that I'm aware of.
Any other questions from the DPW? Okay, hearing none, we'll go to a roll call vote. Brian?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Craig?
Yes.
Kit?
Yes.
Rachel?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Justin?
Yes.
Stephanie?
Yes.
Carol?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
Julie?
Abstain.
Thank you. That concludes the personnel portion of this. We do have one in the operating expenses. That's on the public buildings, property maintenance. You'll see that if you back up in your packet as page 88. So I'll give everybody a couple of seconds to locate that. And I'll turn it over to Jade.
Sure, this is, as I said before, one of the techniques that we utilized was reducing our electricity line items. So for our new members of our entity budget on one line item, our anticipated town-wide electricity costs for the year. If you look at your detail sheet, you'll see 2018 actual, 2019 actual, 2020 originally budgeted, actual expended to date on 2020 at the time that this was printed up, and you'll see that our requested appropriation is $130,000. So we're reducing that line item by 10. That still gives us some breathing room if we're even closer to the 2019 numbers. But as Mary can explain further, if you'd like, we achieve savings from our solar panel. We apply those credits. That electricity is generated. We receive credits. We apply those credits to some of our heavy accounts at wastewater, and then we do spread them out elsewhere. So we achieve some savings there. So we thought that was a good place to reduce the budget. You can see overall, in attempting to make that $70,000 mark, plus a little bit of safety room, we were able to do so in bits and pieces throughout the budget without a significant reduction. That's all I have for the public buildings and property maintenance.
Thank you. I'll ask for a motion.
Motion.
By John. Second by Craig. Any other questions from the committee?
I have a question, and I apologize if this is something I should know, but we haven't spent that much in the past. Why wouldn't we cut even more and have some, I mean, why are we giving them plenty of wiggle room? Like, why can't we cut it to 120 and tell them that, you know, you have to make every effort to spend only what we have given you? Why are we giving them extra?
Yeah, Julie, the number you're looking at, and I think you're probably seeing 108,970 that was expended in 2020. That's as of March 25th, so there's probably been some additional since then.
You think it's $22,000 or 21, and then looking at 19 too, we're still under that. I just, you know, I don't understand the process, and that's why I really don't want to vote on anything yet. This is
No, that's fair.
first,
I'll let
but
Mary
I
or
don't.
Jay maybe answer that then.
My answer to that is I would feel uncomfortable cutting that anymore, making that margin tighter if we misbudgeted or misallocated electricity costs. You can't predict what future costs are. So you have to use historical performance to kind of do a good baseline. I'm fiscally conservative in how I budget, as is Mary. So I didn't want to risk going deeper into that line item and run it into the red if possible. Also, Mary, if you want to explain a little bit more with your experience with that line item, because I know we did talk about cutting more, but we felt we were only comfortable with 10 Was there anything else that we discussed as to why we wanted to leave it at that
Well,
number?
there was the year that the electricity kind of went crazy high in prices, but you did get the contracts settled for that for the coming year. But if we have a really bad solar year, you're gonna need to spend it. If you don't have the credits to not spend it on electricity, we need the funds available to pay the electric bill. That's just the conservative thought I have.
Yeah, I just feel like we're playing it safe. I mean, so what happened? I mean, why wouldn't we have a good solar year? And what would happen if we overspend? And why can't we force everyone's hand to be more proactive in shutting off lights and computers or whatever? I mean, the reality is are people even working in the building?
Well, no, you've heard Jay say that there's a lot of people not working, but they will be. The solar field could go down. We could have 40 inches of snow and get no solar credits from November to March. I can't predict that. And it's not like it's a them or there. It's all of us, Julie, in that it's the town's electricity for the year. I mean, the DPW garage to the lights on the Asheville to Cook Rail Trail to the Council on Aging, it's everything.
I just want to understand.
That's
Can I chime in for a second?
Sure.
I would actually be concerned, just to Julie's point, of cutting it more because 2020 has been such a strange year and usage has been down because town offices have been closed. And so you can't really look at the 2020 actual and extrapolate usage from those numbers. So I agree that it's better to be conservative in this instance.
Thank you, Michelle. Any other questions? Hearing none, I'll do a roll call vote. Brian?
Yes?
John?
Yes.
Craig?
Yes.
Kit?
Yes.
Rachel?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Justin?
Yes.
Stephanie?
Yes.
Carol?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
Julie?
Abstain.
Okay. This concludes everything that was on our agenda for this evening. I do have a few things to go over. First, what I neglected to announce our newest members that are present this evening. And I'd like to welcome them, Justin Duval, Stephanie Melito, and Julie Sneezik. Thank you for agreeing to be on our committee. Next meeting is scheduled for Thursday, where we will be reviewing the warrant articles. For our new members, the warrant articles are what our town meeting members will be voting on later in September. Selectmen will be voting on them on Wednesday. While they're still warm, they'll be in our hands on Thursday, and hopefully in the by Monday, so we can meet all the timing requirements for the 24th town meeting. The meeting has been posted already this afternoon. It's at 5 p.m. It'll be the same with the Zoom dial-in like this evening. Any questions from any committee members before we adjourn? John?
Tim, I'm assuming we're gonna get them an email before the meeting on Thursday.
I believe so, yes.
It's been drafted and they're just being approved.
Right. Okay.
So sometime tomorrow will be available for the selectmen and then they will.
It isn't perfect, but we are under time constraints, so we just,
I feel good about some of the stages.
yeah.
I'd like to read them all.
The
Right.
majority of them, John, you'll find are the zoning changes, because they have to be broken out. So you'll have the regular, as of right now, everything's subject to change right now, which I think I've said a billion times in 2020. You'll have your normal articles, usual articles, the financial articles. There'll be an article asking town meeting to adopt a provision of state law that allows for paid leave time for military members. That's been updated. We haven't adopted it yet. There'll be the citizens petition for the Veterans Work-Off Program. That will be on there. There will be an article regarding a property transfer. There'll be an article on there regarding 40R and then the zoning. The majority of that you'll see, there's like 22 of them that is all regarding that zoning.
Can I request that finance has the draft of them before it even goes to the selectmen? Is that possible? Just so at least we can read him?
Yeah, as long as everybody knows that it's draft.
Exactly, and just put the draft right over it. Yeah. I just don't want to give them only a couple hours to read them. Yeah.
The recommendations won't be on it, that's all.
That's fine, we understand that. Yep. We can follow up with that on Thursday morning, what the recommendations were before the meeting.
Excuse me, Jay, with all of these productions, how's that going to impact our tax rate for next year?
Tax rate, as of right now, will go up. It will be less than what was anticipated for the original fiscal 21. And it's going to settle out at 2280, I believe.
2280.
Yes.
Thank you, 2280. Thank you, John. And that is a 90-cent increase over the fiscal 20 tax rate. The majority of what goes into that 90 cents is all fixed costs. The biggest bulk, or at least one of the biggest bulks, is the debt service required to pay for the 2.5 million living increases, et cetera.
Yeah, I got a question on that. That bond. We voted on the bond, 2 years ago, I believe. And we had a list of projects to do. And the one that just comes to my mind is Charles Street, and I think we budgeted $750,000 plus $500,000 on a temporary bridge that can't be put in. But that, irregardless, we got $1.2 million that we budgeted. We took, I believe when we voted on that bond, we were going to borrow the money when we needed it. And the next thing I knew, all the money was borrowed. Just take the Charles Street money, $1.2 million, how much interest have we paid over 2 years on that $1.2 million? And nothing's been done. We still don't have a bridge on Charles Street.
So Mary can chime in. The initial borrowing was a short-term borrowing. Then it transitioned into a long-term borrowing. By right, actually, we'll probably end up only spending about $2 million because the Community Development Department has earned about $500,000 in grant funds. However, we are researching right now our ability to return the $500,000 to the bank. That is going to likely end up being a legal issue, and I don't necessarily want to go further into it, but I would like to return it. Why? Because we've paid for a whole bunch of work through grants or anticipated work through grants. And to answer your question, Craig, all of the work that was earmarked in there is not work easily accomplished without significant runway time for engineering. Also, any of those projects that were identified during the bond conversation, if they match up to a grant source, Donna has and her team has shifted the priority of projects that we can pay for with the grant, achieving a savings on the bond side. So I don't know the specifics as to project. That's also the grant drainage project at engineering. It's taken a while. The Crowder Street project's been in the pipe for 2 years.
I guess what bothered me is we went out and jumped ahead and and we put the cart before the horse. We borrowed the money before if we weren't ready because of engineering, maybe we shouldn't have borrowed that much money at that time.
Mary can jump in, but I leave.
Do the borrowing. Our bond counsel at the time said we would get a much more favorable rate if we just bit the bullet and borrowed the 2.5 million. We were trying to set it up so we could pay it off for each grant we got, but that we haven't realized that, as Jay said, that's about as much as we can say about that right now.
It is what it is.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
You're right, it is, unfortunately.
It's not, whenever we have these conversations, you can ask Mary, but my face usually is red while we're talking about them. But unfortunately, one of those infrastructure projects that we need to do, it's the only way to fund it. And there's a cost to using other people's money.
Yeah, I guess what bothers me is I've been around here long enough. Stuff gets done and then forgotten about. You know, we pass something and a year ago, down the road, nobody knows anything about it. And it just goes away. And we got a bond out there, right?
I think from an engineering perspective, the intent is that once they're done done well, and then they have to be incorporated into the DPW, maintenance routine if there's anything in there. Most of that is cleaning debris out, et cetera, et cetera. But also when they're re-engineered, they have to be engineered now for the realities that we're facing. For example, if you look at the Grant Street, Valley Street, project, that had sections of pipe in it that went from, and I'm estimating, I don't know the exact, but, went from an 18-inch pipe to an 8-inch pipe and then back up to a 12-inch pipe, but that doesn't work well. So all that has to be corrected. And then when you start digging into the project, you eventually find stuff in the field. We can't leave it while we're in there. We have to dig into it. On page 34 of your budget, these numbers haven't changed. You'll see the capital pay down annual on the storm damage bond is $140,000. You'll see the interest payment is $82.50. Also, I have the floor, and I lost the page, but if you look at the section entitled Employee Benefits, that's where the workman's comp insurance is paid from. All in one bucket. I didn't want that to lose my
I got one last thing. The flood control chute, which is near and dear to my heart. That's when I was a kid, I watched them build it. The area below the township, there's brush growing in that riprap, or slope paving as it's called today. And if we let it grow, it's going to destroy that project, because it's just going to push those rocks alongside, out of the way. And once the water gets under those rocks, it's nice looking, but we, for years, cut the brush alongside that river, cut it right down to nothing. In fact, years ago, we used to put a herbicide on it, the whole thing. Are we gonna maintain that flood wall?
I don't know the specifics, because that's not where I go day to day. We can discuss it with DPW Director Tober, but I'll give you the overarching view of flood control. It's the same issue we have with everything else. We have 13 staff in DPW, 2 stay in the garage on the maintenance of equipment. They're used where they can out in the field. We have an operations supervisor who's presently coordinating all of these projects. You have 4 in the parks, cemeteries, cutting all that, and that leaves 6 to handle everything else, plus your 5 seasonals. I know for a fact that we bought 2 PR brush trimmers in order to expedite specifically brush cutting within the flood control zone.
You can't get those things down on that rock, on those rocks.
So I can't answer your question, Craig, because I just don't, that's what DPW's.
I mean, can we look at spending some of the money that we budgeted for summer help? I mean, we had money for, I believe you said 11 summer, help employees, and we only used 5.
So we cut that out.
At some point, it's gonna get expensive.
A lot of things.
We'll speak with, right to the city yard, town yard, that area. Speak with Robert. I'm sorry? That says that work is being scheduled, correct?
Okay.
They usually, as I've learned now, this is only my second season through, flood control usually is late summer work. And like
As
everything.
long, you know, as long as it gets done, even if it gets done every other year, but when you start letting it go, they cut it a couple of years ago because I complained about it, but it hadn't been cut in 4 or 5 years. There was some good size, small trees growing in there then.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Unless there are any more questions, I will, I'll take a motion to adjourn and then roll call. Motion by Brian, second by John. Okay. So, Brian, we'll call to adjourn.
All right?
Doing the roll call to adjourn.
Oh, okay. Here? Yeah.
John?
Yes.
Craig?
Yeah.
Kim?
Yes.
Rachel?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Justin?
Yes.
Stephanie?
Yes.
Carol?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
And Julie?
Yes.
Okay, tonight's meeting's adjourned. I will either see or hear from you on Thursday. Have a good evening, everyone.